see most of you. As was said, I'm John Concannon, and we thought I'd begin by just kind of telling you a little bit about myself, because I'll be pretty involved if this all works out one way. So I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, I'm a former middle school teacher. I did that right before I went to law school a long time ago. And then I was a probation officer during law school. Then I was a city attorney. And then in 1986, I became the first in-house attorney for Cincinnati Public Schools. And I did that until 2002. And I left then because I could retire. And I usually don't have to explain that to teachers. But that was a great job. I learned a lot. Stayed pretty busy and saw just about everything. So I retired because I could. And then I went into the private sector after that. I kind of made three promises to myself. One was that I'd never work for a government agency as an employee. Two is I'd never practice full-time. And three was that I'd never do anything I didn't really feel like doing. So that's been kind of nice. That's one of the good things about retirement.
I'm glad that we have this opportunity for you. One of the things that I felt since this whole initiative has begun is that my role in it has been to tell you my feelings about my meeting, or our meeting that we had with John Concannon. So we're happy today that we have the opportunity to introduce you to John, so that in one sense, I don't have to tell you what I think about him, that you can ask him questions and form your own opinion on this important decision that we have pending and that's going to happen. So thank you so much for coming. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Concannon, who we're asking to come represent us in the future, should we move forward with this plan to de-associate ourselves with the OEA and for the NEA. But without further ado, here's John, and again, thank you for coming. We'll have questions coming from the audience.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all. I can see most of you. As was said, I'm John Concannon, and we thought I'd begin by just kind of telling you a little bit about myself, because I'll be pretty involved if this all works out one way. So I'm looking forward to it. Anyway, I'm a former middle school teacher. I did that right before I went to law school a long time ago. And then I was a probation officer during law school. Then I was a city attorney. And then in 1986, I became the first in-house attorney for Cincinnati Public Schools. And I did that until 2002. And I left then because I could retire. And I usually don't have to explain that to teachers. But that was a great job. I learned a lot. Stayed pretty busy and saw just about everything. So I retired because I could. And then I went into the private sector after that. I kind of made three promises to myself. One was that I'd never work for a government agency as an employee. Two is I'd never practice full-time. And three was that I'd never do anything I didn't really feel like doing. So that's been kind of nice. That's one of the good things about retirement. I've also been a professor at Xavier University in the Grad School of Education. I actually started at Xavier back in '84, teaching a criminal law class, and then I moved into school law afterwards. So since then, when I retired, I started teaching a lot more. And actually, at one point, I was teaching 8 to 10 classes a year. And I had some full-time professor friends saying that I taught more than they did. And of course, they made more money than I did. But I wanted to keep practicing law, so that worked pretty well for me. Now they're limiting us to 2 classes a semester and 2 in the summer, which doesn't break my heart. I'm okay. But it's been fun. I've taught law, I've taught staff personnel regularly, education administration, and now I'm happy to say that I'm teaching one of the first 2 classes in the doctoral program. I'm teaching a school ethics class, which has been fun and very interesting. I've taught 2 of your prior superintendents, Dave Quattroni and Jane Knudsen. I've also had several people in my class, including Nick Carpenter, Josh Kaufman, Rob Guy, former employee Rob Kramer, Melanie Carr, and others. So that's been fun. In my law practice, and I feel like walking around, but I'm a stapler. In my law practice, I've been in charge of the legal department, and I was also in charge of the labor relations department for Cincinnati Public Schools, which was really fun. I've done a lot of negotiating, and of course the other piece to it is contract administration. If somebody has a grievance, if there's an arbitration, all of that. So, negotiating is one piece that goes on for a while. In your case, right now, it's gone on for a long while. And then there's the administration of the contract. And that's been great. And I'll tell you that I have worked with your current superintendent on the other side of things, student issues. And I've worked with your high school principal, same thing. And I've worked with and known your district's attorney, Bruce Petrie, for many, many years. We've always worked together well. We've never been on the same side of an issue. And I can say I respect him, and he's a good lawyer. And I think he'd say the same about me. So that's what's gone that way. I've negotiated on both sides, the employer side and the union side. And it's been interesting, and I thought it would be a huge adjustment, but it hasn't been, because it requires the same knowledge base, and it's all about trying to do what's fair. And that's made it pretty nice. I was trained years ago in principal negotiations. If anybody has that, there's a great book called Getting to Yes. There's also the term you hear all the time, win-win negotiations. But principal negotiations to me means you act like human beings. And there's a little more to it than that. But I got trained by the people that actually started that. In Boston, we went up there. And that's when I got into negotiating, really, because we had our 2 teams working up there together. And I emerged as the leader for CPS to do those, and learned a lot. I also did a lot of work for other districts. Dayton Public Schools, when I retired, they wanted me to be their in-house attorney, and I didn't want to do that because it violated those rules I told you about. So I talked them into a contract, and I was the lawyer through a contract, and I had other clients at the time too. I think they had 11 unions, teachers, and 10 others, as I recall. But that kept me pretty busy. They were represented by OEA. And I've also done work for a lot of different types of districts. Loveland, I negotiated all their contracts once or twice a few years back. Bethel Tate Schools, Valley View, Franklin, St. Bernard Elmwood Place, and I know I'm forgetting a few. I currently represent the Administrators Association for Cincinnati Public Schools, which is a little bit unusual, but they actually have the equivalent of a union, and we just wrapped up a contract with the board for them, which is always interesting. And I was pretty complimented when they called me and asked me to do it, because I used to be on the other side of that. So that was good. I also represent two non-school unions, a company union and a firefighter union. I've had education cases beyond K to 12. I've done cases against UC, against Miami, and now a couple of nursing schools. So that's been interesting too. it's actually more tedious than K-12. I've done a lot of arbitrations. I've done a lot of grievance hearings, a lot of teacher discipline hearings from both sides. And I've actually done some fact-finding, which I don't think Indian Hill has ever been to fact-finding, although I understand things have been headed that way and may or may not continue that way. But I know that process pretty well. And you do it once, and you learn a whole lot more about it. So that's been good. I'm with the law firm of Freaking and Batts, which usually gets a few snickers, but we like to call ourselves the best freaking law school in our law firm in Ohio. But it's a labor relations firm, and if you notice when you watch the news and you see some employees in trouble, they're usually represented by one of the Freaking and Batts lawyers. And the other part about that is I have an 11 attorney backup for things, which leads to my next piece, and that is I'm extremely available. Our office is downtown. I can get here very quickly, and I'm not worried about doing that. And travel time and expensive travel is minimal as a result of that. My style is pretty much collaborative. That's one interesting thing about labor relations is you've got these people that want you to be the nastiest person in the world, and then all these people that want you to work cooperatively, and then a few people in between. It's kind of like divorce lawyers. But all right, so I can say that, but I won't roll over. I've seen about everything. I've been cussed out many times, and I've gotten mad back on occasions. But I think you get a lot more done when you get along with the people and they're respected by you and the other way. I'm getting referrals pretty regularly from union people that I used to be on the other side of, which again is a nice thing to happen. I have to tell you, even though I can't afford to live in Indian Hill, I know your community pretty well, and I know the schools, and I think there are some general negotiating tactics that are pretty much standard that don't necessarily work in your community. And I mean that sincerely. I think you have to consider with whom you're dealing. And you have to recognize that your community's sympathy to what's going on within the schools very much depends on who your community members are. And that's just extremely important. We had a huge business study of Cincinnati Public years ago, and we immediately learned where the business people were versus where the working people were. As a matter of fact, I'm forgetting his name, but he was hired as a consultant to the board. Your superintendent before David Quattrone.
Boston.
Yeah, Mr. Boston. Yeah, he was involved. He was hired by the business community to work with the schools. So, I remember that. I know, one thing I know very well about your district is that they are serious about having the best teachers they can get. And I'm not here to make you feel good. That's just a given. And you all know it, but you need to know that other people who know it are aware of that too. I love it when I have a student tell me that the Indian Hill people are coming to their school district to watch them teach. And I thought, well, nobody else does that. And if I was the district that was getting raided, I might not be too crazy about the idea of somebody coming in and stealing one of my teachers. But that is an amazing effort. I know that they also pay well. For various reasons, through the years, it has always been the top three have been at Sycamore, Indian Hill, Cincinnati, in whatever order. And Sycamore and Indian Hill had their reasons, Cincinnati had theirs, which was to get people who might not otherwise want to come there. But I know that in Indian Hill, it's a strong belief that you all should be at the top or near the top of the county pay schedule. And I think Madera did a study on that. You always have been right up there. And again, that's not said to flatter you, but I will tell you that I don't believe it would ever be in Indian Hills school districts or boards' interest to, when it all comes down to it, to pay you beyond that top tier. And I also have to say that I don't think your community would stand for that either. The people that pay taxes, I think they really believe that they want their taxes to go toward getting the best people, and most of them can't believe the pay rates that people in education get anyway. I wanted to say that. There have been some concerns. I'll just try to anticipate a few because I do want to turn it over to questions pretty quickly here. I'm aware of some concerns, and I know that where things were with bargaining, things were going slowly along, and my understanding is that and Ann has been very good about briefing me, and we've talked a lot, but there's a lot to catch up on, but I'm getting there. But that, there were concerns that things could just fall apart if there's a switch in the union representation. I have to tell you, things could just fall apart anyway if the parties chose to do that. This is not going to be something that, if there's a change in union representation, that is just going to come along and make everything take a whole lot longer, or make things just fall apart, because either party has the power to do that anyway. I don't know what you know about fact-finding, but even if you went to fact-finding after mediation attempts, it could just be, it fell apart, therefore you start all over again. Even the things you had agreed upon prior don't hold when you get past that piece. So I wanted to mention that. There's been a concern, I know, about liability insurance, what would happen. I believe that would be seamless, and if there was ever any kind of a gap, there can be insurance for what we call past acts. So insurance can be bought where the carrier will agree that the gap would also be covered. And I do have to tell you, my experience in all these years in education is it's extremely rare that a teacher gets sued personally and the district doesn't have to jump in there and assume the defense. An intentional act, beating up a student, the district is likely to say you're on your own, and they can do that. But the sort of thing that most people worry about are negligent acts, supervision issues or something like that. The district has to defend you in something like that. So I don't see that as a huge piece. I know there were other questions about what if the board just decides to dig their feet in, they've got a new union, and they don't want to help, they don't want to be cooperative, they want it to just kind of fall apart. The SERB, State Employment Relations Bureau, we have the ability to file what's called an unfair labor practice. Anytime there's any bad faith in negotiations on either side, the other party can file a SERB. That's the main thing they're there for, is to protect the integrity of the negotiation system and the administration of the contract. So it's not like, it's not as if the board could just decide to take total advantage of the situation. Say, oh, we got some new people in here, we're not even going to bother with that. Can't be done. Okay? I know other concerns, and again, I'm trying to anticipate a few things, and then I really look forward to questions. This is a very unusual situation. I can tell you, about the only thing I haven't had to do all these years of doing labor work for schools is a switch in union representation. I know what happens. I know what the rules around it are. I know that SERB is extremely involved in doing it, but I don't know anybody who specializes in that sort of thing. But the district, Indian Hill School, has to stay neutral. I had a brief conversation with Bruce Petrie, told him I'd be doing this if it flies, and just to kind of say that. And we both knew that he couldn't take a side in this, and he also couldn't give any unfair advantage to anybody here. But, understand that even though they have to stay neutral, they have to treat each entity in this, the OEA group and this group, they have to treat them equally. And we've been conservative so far. We purposely had this meeting here tonight rather than on campus, although if OEA can do it, we probably can too. So we'll be reviewing some of that, but at this point we're being extremely conservative. Understand I'm not anti-OEA by any means. I don't even know your rep. I've known others. I've met your previous rep. I don't know if Robin Busby, I think you told me she never did this, but I consider her a personal friend, and I know their attorneys are good, so I'm not here to trash them. I will say I'm closer than Columbus, and just a few of the other things I mentioned. And I know these are the longest negotiations you've ever had. There's not a collective bargaining agreement at this point. And, currently you're headed toward fact-finding. So I also am aware that, maybe most importantly, that there was a tentative agreement that the membership rejected. And that's something that I really like to avoid. I think it's important that, if I'm working on negotiating this, and there's a team that the group has designated as their people have to be well informed as to what's going on. And I think I would consider it a failure on my part, or the rest of the team's part, if we put forth a tentative agreement based upon what we thought the feel of the group was and then have it rejected. Okay? So there might be various reasons for that, but I wanted you to know that. So with that, any questions? I know some people are still going to be coming in. So I won't make you sit through all that stuff again. Good. I was afraid I had anticipated questions so well, which I know couldn't have happened. Yes, sir.
What do you think is our biggest risk?
That your worst nightmares would come true, but I think the chances of that are just small. The worst nightmares being that this would go on and on. I have made myself readily available. There is a phone hearing with SERB scheduled for the 28th, which is a week from Monday?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I know what it is. It's the 28th, and we're going to have a phone conference, and we're going to try to get through this and get it moving. I got the available dates, and I chose that. I said I can do that very first one that the rest of you can do. So we're going to move on that. SERB is all about, it was created to make sure the process was fair, and I think that generally SERB favors elections. They don't want to find reasons not to allow an election. There are certain things that have to be done. This was picked up at a point where the contract was expired, and there was no extension to it, which is the legal window where that can be done. And remember, it's SERB that created those rules. So by them saying you can do this, and the I's being dotted and the T's crossed, I don't see them not wanting to allow people to choose. So I know, that reminds me of the one question, the one answer I tell people not to give in their interviews in my class when they say, well, what's your biggest fault? And they say, I care too much. When you say what's the biggest nightmare, that's the best thing I can tell you, really. And that's, yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that there was some speculation that if we disbanded, it could all fall apart from where it had progressed. Is the best case scenario that we will keep the major components of the agreement intact and try to build a contract from what they've already done?
If you're happy with them, yes. Yes. I don't see Indian Hills board, and remember when I say board, even though is there one at the table? Or
yes.
There is one at the table, which is happening more often. I don't see any Indian Hill board as not wanting to go with what they've already apparently thought is a good agreement. And I'm sure they won't do it just because the official representative has changed. I just don't see that happening. So I don't see any problem. I don't see a downside to the new union. Okay, I just don't see that. And please, if you have some concerns about that, please ask me, because you might point something out to me, or I might have checked out something that you're worried about.
I have another one then.
Sure.
My other question, when we had a meeting back at the middle school, not a couple of weeks ago, a couple of people were concerned that given the fact that we do not have a financial reserve yet, what could happen if we overextended our use of you? Would you bill us? How do we, not that we expect that to occur, but should it, what would be the expectation?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's like, I'd rather buy a car when I have money, not to compare myself to a used car. But I'm purposely keeping the billing down for now. And Ann and I have talked about it. I said I'll be fair, and she guaranteed me that for whatever I have to do, the money will be there. But I am keeping it down. Do you want to say something on that?
Yeah, in answer to your question, when we sign up to become members, you're going to have the option to take it out in your paycheck like you do now, but you'll also have the option to pay it in one lump sum ahead of time. And I've had about 10 to 12 people tell me that they're willing to do that. So that's already $5,000, $4,800 that we would have.
Awesome.
Okay? And honestly, he is giving us the teacher poverty rate. He really is.
And I appreciate you telling me how much money you have available now. And I do have to say, my firm does some personal injury work too. And when people do that, you take a gamble. It's like, do I think something good is here, and I'm willing to gamble that it might not pan out, but I think it will, so I'm doing a little bit of that. The other piece is, understand most of my clients come to me and they've just been fired, and it's like, well, what a terrible time to ask somebody for money. Once again, we're patient about collecting if that's an issue. But hey, yeah, am I taking a little gamble here? Sure, but only because I think it might work out.
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Does OEA go away, or do you anticipate them coming back and trying to garner more support? How do you see that playing out?
Well, they're limited if this group took over from OEA, became the official representative. OEA is limited as to how they can attempt to come back. There's a time window that they'd have. There's also the fact that they would have seen how the vote went, and unless they could show that things went poorly under the new group, I don't know what their reason would be. I can tell you that the cases I know where a union was gone, I don't know of any that came back. I'm not saying they wouldn't try, but sure, it's possible, but it would be a tough road to hoe.
So you don't anticipate any tactics or conversation to steer
Jim, do you mean before the election or after the election?
either one?
Well, before, they're going to do everything they
Okay,
can.
but after the election?
Then they're limited.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, I won't pretend that OEA and NEA doesn't have a script that they follow when somebody wants to change. It's important to them to keep people, and I understand it. I'm not being critical of it, but they will pull out the script, certainly.
And they have pulled out the script. And when I talked to John on the phone and told him, I had that update in front of me and I read that, and he's like, yeah, I heard all this before. So he's very aware of the games that they play.
And the beauty of it is, SERB referees the whole thing.
thing or something that may not necessarily be true or accurate.
I think that's true up until the election.
So do we need to,
Well, we're hearing it now.
Right.
Well,
We're hearing it now. but-
the goal is that when we have this phone conference on April 28th, OEA has requested a hearing or further investigation. And we're hoping on that phone conference, we can smooth those pieces out and go straight to the voting. As I think we, for the most part, have made up our minds, we've heard the information. We've been with OEA apparently for 52 years, so we know what they have to offer. This is our 5th meeting about the new organization, so we know what this is. So we're ready to vote. And honestly, whoever wins, I would like to get it to a vote so we can move on and get a contract. If we have the phone conference on April 28th, all of that has to go to a 3rd board meeting, and the next one that's available for us to make the deadline is May 15th. There has to be a 10-day window when they announce the election. So if you go to board meeting on May 15th, even if it could happen the next day, they'd say, okay, on May 16th, in 10 days, you'll be voting. So the earliest I'm looking at is the end of May. But if we can start voting before school is out, that would be nice to be able to wrap this up before summer hits and we can actually enjoy our summer.
And Ann, I'm glad you reminded me too. The phone call on the 28th, the school district is a part of that. There's 3 parties involved, OEA, our group, and the school district. Now the school district, as I told you, can't take sides, but one thing I'm sure, without even having discussed it with anybody there, is that the thing they're going to be saying on the 28th is, let's get this rolling because we want to know who we're going to be negotiating with. So, we'll be asking for an election, and I think the district, it's in their interest to ask for that to happen soon too.
It may help people's peace of mind if you can answer the question about if we choose to disaffiliate from OEA, would that be an option for us to reaffiliate, even though that hasn't happened in the past, later? As in, is there any way that the board could limit our access to reaffiliate with a national or state union in the future?
No. Did everybody hear the question? Yeah, if just make sure I have it right, if the group we're part of, if that group was designated as the official representative, does that prohibit it from going with OEA again, or even OFT again? No, not at all. Not at all. That is free to happen. They can never pick, the board can never pick who you want to represent you.
Okay. Thank you.
That would be an unfair labor practice. Nick?
In terms of the voting itself, if you abstain from voting, is that considered a vote for OEA?
No,
It's not.
they only count the votes that are turned in. So secret ballot by mail, so if only 100 people vote, it's only out of 100.
We need 60%.
We need 50% plus 1.
50% of the ones turned in?
Yes.
Okay.
Fred, did you have a question?
Yeah, does there have to be a none of the above on the ballot?
I think that's a statute. He's saying it's going to be IHEA, the new organization IHEPO, and Leisha said there's also got to be a none at all.
Right.
I mean, I guess we can ask her that on the phone conference, but I
Yeah.
think that has to be on there.
Yeah,
I've already asked her once.
and the piece of that is usually the people that feel that way don't turn in a ballot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Mark?
Yeah, so we've talked about the immediate, we've been discussing the immediate effects of all this, and as a teacher with hopefully many more years at the school, I'm worried about the long run here, the long game, about going to a new union. We've talked about finances, immediate consequences of finances. We've talked about unfair labor practices being sort of one tool in the arsenal of this organization. Should go with this one. Can you speak to both of those and maybe your component as we go 10, 15, 20 years into the future? How susceptible to rate fluctuations are we? I mean, that is the rate that we would pay you or someone like you. What other tools in our arsenal do we have to your component is probably a pretty important component of this, especially when it comes to negotiating time. You said you're in retirement, so fair to say you probably won't be negotiating contracts when I'm approaching retirement. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that component, when that component changes with a local union as opposed to an OEA union? Have you ever seen that as, you know, have you ever seen a union fall apart because the representation changes from the league standpoint? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I've seen it happen more with the union leadership than the outside attorneys. You know, I was asked this question when we sat down, and my answer was, well, I feel pretty good, and I'm enjoying it. But you know, that's really one reason that it's a good thing that I'm in a 12-person firm. That even though I'm the school specialist, others are getting into that more with me, and everybody there, I think, is a very capable lawyer. On the other hand, that company union I represent, they had the same attorney for about 20 years, and they came to me 2 years ago, and I've been representing them ever since. And I think if you ask them, they'd say, although the last person did fine, you know, it was a pretty smooth transition that worked pretty well. But you know, you did mention something that I think about a lot, and that is the whole idea of what's going on now. I mean, 15 years ago, if somebody had said that every year a teacher isn't going to be making, or a teacher will be making more, we all thought every year somebody taught they'd be making more the next year. You know, the 16 years I was with Cincinnati Public, the 32 years I was in public law administration, never once did I not make more the next year. And you know, I know that's happened. I don't know if it's happened here, but with increases in healthcare or you know, as you all have experienced, no raise, no steps, you can actually be netting less the year before. And that was absolutely unheard of. So things have changed, which quickly, and I know there's a question up here too, quickly, let me say that I know that you all, that it was a real shock to everybody just a few years ago when Senate Bill 5 was in effect and everybody was real uncertain what was going to happen, and you all did get flatlined, and that was a real shock. And I know that that planted a lot of worry, understandably, about how much the community still supported the schools, etc. You know, that was, I think, a very unusual piece. That's not going to happen again. You know, I think Wisconsin and Ohio would be the last two places to ever try something like that again. But I think we're coming around to seeing at least things getting a little better as far as salary goes. Unfortunately, we've seen retirement get diminished pretty badly.
Yeah, I guess my question on the raise wasn't our salary, but the raise that we pay into the union, I guess the retainer that
Your dues?
the dues.
Yeah.
Would we be more susceptible in our dues to a severe spike in what we pay than we would be with OEA?
Honestly, our dues right now with OEA are $757.
They're more now than they
Right.
would be if we change. Right.
And we're gonna back them off to 400. But the other independents that I talked to, we're still about 2 times too much.
Okay.
Solon City Schools is 200, Shaker Heights is 150. Xavier, Tom, didn't you say they're $25?
$25 a
Yeah.
year.
So I think we're collecting too much.
Right.
But
My question deals with strength of membership. I mean, they're just, you know, getting as many people
Right.
to join this union as possible.
Right.
And that an issue of changing a raise from year to year, whether that's possible. Obviously, you know, in the next 15 years, the rates that we pay will have to go up because of inflation and everything else. But
I mean, I guess I can't guarantee you.
right.
But I can add another piece to that helps, I think. CERB referees that too.
Okay.
Membership has a say in their dues that CERB referees for them. So when I was with Cincinnati Public, I always loved it because that's the time I got to step back and the members in the union had to duke it out if there was an issue about that. So good point. Good point. It's not like one of those things where yeah, take this and it'll be cheap at first, and then we've got the leverage to do what we want.
Terry, if I can ask that, it's not really a question, I'm sorry, but to me, the price of the dues is important, but having a respectful, open, honest, trustworthy group of professionals is worth the money.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Mark, a lot of people, right now, we only have 76% participation with OEA. And right now, just looking at the people that are coming on board to this new organization, we're going to be larger.
Good.
And that's the goal, is to get a more cohesive, collaborative group.
Right.
And not that it necessarily fits here, but I want you guys to know that with John, we use him as much as we need him or as little as we need him. If we get to the point where it can be a panel of teachers that sits across from the superintendent and assistant superintendent and negotiate a contract and then say, here, look this over to make sure that it's legal, that's excellent. Then we have to use his service less. So that's kind of the vision of where we're going. So I really want to make use of our talents and our intelligence in doing this. Marcia, did you have something?
I just had a question because, and I'm not sure about any of the details or anything, but I know several years ago, like Marymount, teachers went on strike and they fired them.
78.
They have no representation, like no union or anything now?
Marymount and Madera do not have unions.
Right, so how is that possible? Like, can Indian Hill suddenly say, okay, we don't want to have, our teachers have representation?
No.
Has the law changed or?
The law changed greatly, and Marymount was a big piece of why. The two things that changed in the law as a result of that and other things were strikes became a lot harder to have. There's a big process before a district can strike because the public didn't like that. It was not a good thing that teachers went on strike. And you know, one thing I like about this group is it's not a traditional union in the sense that it's professionals. And I think when you said the 76% membership, I've experienced that a lot of teachers don't join unions because of the union identifying too much with unprofessional type of things. And again, I'm not criticizing OEA, but that's a mindset. And I know your community probably thinks that way too. Why do teachers need a union? They're professionals. Well, they do because of some bad things that have gone on. But that's why I like the idea of keeping it above board and keeping it professional when you're enforcing your rights. But the other thing is they said that SERB is clear that the district cannot interfere at all with a group of teachers or other school employees unionizing and picking a union. Madera and Marymount could do it tomorrow. There is no another one, the Oaks. The Oaks does not have a union. They could all unionize tomorrow, and if management did anything to discourage it, they could be slapped with an unfair labor practice. But you know, I know that the Ohio Federation of Teachers tried to unionize the Oaks, but what those schools often do, those school districts often do, to their credit, is they try to find ways, they try to make sure that their people don't want to get a union together, but they're perfectly free to do it. Yes, sir.
For teachers who retired this year and were hoping that a contract was signed, when a contract is signed, hopefully whenever that is, over the summer and the fall, would they be eligible for retroactive pay if they've already retired?
Would teachers who retired be eligible for retroactive pay? If it was in the agreement, yes. And I've seen that happen both ways. So if the team decided they wanted to put that in there, yes.
Would that affect their, as I understand it, with their retirement income with STRS, that's dependent on their highest levels of pay, an average of their highest levels, so it would affect the STRS as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Come on.
I have another question.
Sure.
If this goes through and it gets, doesn't get blocked too much and everything, would one of the first steps be to do a survey? Or how would
lunch meetings and talk about what we want, we have to have group meetings. I mean, in this process, I've talked to some people who are adamant that they like work to contract. I have some people that are adamant that they don't like work to contract. And then OEA comes in and says, do work to contract. We need to collectively decide what we want to do, what we're comfortable with in this community, and then we'll do it, then we'll buy into it. But being told what to do, we don't react very well to that. So I think we do have to do more surveys and more questioning.
I just like the time frame. I'm just thinking, if we can't vote until the end of May, we really can't get a contract probably until the beginning of next school year, really, could we?
Well, I have asked Dr. Miles, and I said, you know, whoever emerges after this vote, are you willing to spend a couple weeks in June and negotiate this contract? Because I really don't want us, after a short summer, to have to come back and have this hanging over our head. And he said he's willing to, and the board's willing to. So it's just going to be a matter of what happens on April 28th. It's like, hurry up and wait.
And again, I think that's a real advantage to our April 28th meeting. We're going to have two parties saying, let's get this election done so we can move on.
And the other party's not going to say that, so.
And that would also, is you're thinking that because two of the three parties want to move on and settle the contract, it wouldn't behoove the board to dismantle or to bring up issues that are not currently brought up, such as sick days or reimbursement for educational credits or anything like that.
I would encourage the membership of the new union to preserve as much of the tentative agreement as possible. Anything that isn't livable, I would say, well, you know, look real hard at what it is, and if you can't live with it, let us know. But, you know, err on the side of living with it for now if you can. I think that the board has the exact same interest. That they would rather, whether it's us or OEA, the board is going to want to stick with it as much of that as they can. It would be a little harder for them to say we've changed our mind than it would be for a new union to say, you know, we saw what they thought was important, and we've got these 2 or 3 things that we feel differently about. We can say to them, what changed your mind? They can't say that to us.
I just want to say that with this last survey that OEA had us do, I think we know what needs to be changed in the tentative agreement already. So I don't know that we would have to have lots of sit-downs. I think it's salaries and steps.
Did you get the results of that, Janine?
I think we had a little blurb, didn't we, about,
We had an update, one of their little
Yeah,
flyers.
I'm just saying, you have the results.
That was in one of the newsletters, yeah.
John, when we met earlier, one of the things that I wanted to, or that we asked about that I think would benefit everybody hearing was your representation of teachers who had gotten in trouble, and what your priorities were in representing those people. If you could speak a little bit to your strategy when a teacher has an issue and how you prioritize what you want to do when you walk in there to represent that teacher, I think that might be something that people would benefit hearing.
Yeah, good. When somebody's in trouble and the board's terminating them, well, first of all, if they're not renewing someone, I let them know, look, if they follow the process, unless there's some unconstitutional basis for the non-renewal, we can't do much. Okay, that's just the way the law is written.
Which is true with OEA as well.
Yeah. But, you know, let's make sure they follow the process. I found a few times where they didn't, you know, in different districts. And then I try to let people know, you know, let's talk about the merits of getting rid of you, but understand your leverage is limited. With terminations, I think the important thing is to make sure that people are treated fairly. When I drove up here today, I got a call right as I was getting out of the car from a teacher who's being terminated. And I try to let them know what the opportunities are. I recognize that a board board to fire someone. And whenever I represented a board from that side, I always said, always accept a resignation if somebody's going to give it, because then you don't have to go through the costs and the risk of a trial or a referee hearing, an arbitration. Knowing that and having learned that myself, I usually try to get some kind of a severance piece for people, and that is often doable. And frankly, that's the conversation I just had with this person. You know, they've offered you this. I'm telling you that based on what happened, I think your chances are less than 50-50, so you ought to think about taking it. Okay, so is that pretty much it?
Yeah, the exit strategy idea,
Yeah.
I think is important for
It
people
is,
here.
it is. And people have to realize too that they have to worry about their license when they go through this sort of thing. The state of Ohio Department of Education and districts have gotten very cooperative about combining their efforts on licensure and termination. And that has a lot to do with it too. And I deal with ODE often enough about whether people should lose their license, get it suspended, or not have any action taken. Yes?